Hey up! Right, I think I can confidently say it's taken about 2 years of research to get to the point where I'm confident in making this video. Now, my own experiences are my own experiences, and for the greater part, that's what I'm drawing on for the content to this video. But the other thing is, what's taken the time, if you like, is conversations with people online, mainly in the comments section on the various videos that I've made over the years. Now, I've been riding motorcycles on the road for 46 years now. That's nearly half a century. I mean, I remember when I was younger, sort of in my teens and in my 20s, or even later for that matter, half a century seems like an enormous amount of time. Yeah, I speak to some people in comments that make me feel like a baby. You know, they've been riding for 50 years, in some cases 60 years. You know, they started riding motorcycles in the 1960s. And they're still doing it like me. Some of them have had accidents, but they've not been serious accidents. And when you get talking to these guys, there are certain common denominators that I recognise and follow myself. Things that I believe have preserved my life and my safety over the years because of the way I conduct myself on the road. And even off the road, for that matter. One thing that you've got to get in your head right from the start, it doesn't matter how long you've been riding, you don't know everything. You're constantly learning. That learning curve never ends. You don't reach a point in motorcycling at 5 years or 10 years or 20 years where suddenly you know everything there is to know about motorcycling and you know how to keep yourself safe. That never happens, but a lot of people fall into the trap that because they've been riding, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, they've now reached the ultimate point of motorcycle competence. And that brings me on to the first of two very broad points, is that a lot of people mistake luck for wisdom. That is, because they've been ignoring things or not doing things for 5 years or 10 years, they believe that they know that they're doing the right thing, when really they've just been lucky. The consequence of their, if you like, negligence has just not caught up with them yet. You cannot ride a motorcycle safely if your motorcycle is not safe, and the only way that you can know it's safe is by regularly maintaining it. Every motorcycle handbook that I've ever read from any bike that I've ever owned always stresses that you need to keep your motorcycle clean and in a safe condition, and it gives you a list of tasks and checks to do before you ride the bike. These are what are commonly known as pre-ride checks. Yeah, it's amazing how many people don't do them, and they announce that they don't do them with pride. In fact, some people even scoff at the idea of regularly cleaning the motorcycles. They'll openly brag that they can have a motorcycle for 5 years and never ever clean it because, somehow that's sort of sissy, and by not cleaning it, it makes them look like a bit of a rebel, maybe, a bit cool. I don't know, I really don't know what they're thinking. But all these guys, these survivors that have survived motorcycling for 50 years plus, have one thing in common. They keep the bikes clean and they do the checks and regularly maintain them. Now, for a start, you can efficiently check everything on a motorcycle if it's covered in crap. You can't check the safety and efficiency of something if you can't see it. So the act of regularly cleaning and preserving your bike doesn't just preserve it so that it lasts longer, it forces you to examine every square inch of your motorcycle as you clean it and then dry it off, so you spot defects before they become a major problem or even a danger to you as a rider. Brake hoses can fail, brake fluid can go past its sell-by date and not work properly. Chains can rust or stretch to the point where they're no longer safe. The same goes with tyres. It's not just about tread depth, it's also about the age of the tyre. Tyres dry out as they get older, walls can crack and become unsafe. Tyre pressures, the amount of people I talk to that never check the tyre pressures. I even know a few people that don't check the tyre pressures. They consider it to be something that the dealership has to do when they take it in for a service once a year. Yet all these components and more are potentially lethal to the rider if they're not checked and things go wrong. Like I say, luck is no substitute for wisdom and experience. Familiarise yourself with your handbook, familiarise yourself with your tools, and make sure that you have the necessary tools to do it. Do your pre-ride checks and learn how to adjust and maintain the user maintainable parts of your motorcycle. It will very probably at some stage save your life. Now, point number 2 is skill. Do not confuse luck with skill. First of all, when you start riding a motorcycle, leave your ego at home. Ego is the biggest killer of motorists, and especially motorcyclists by far. For some strange reason, I've never really been able to work it out. There's this mindset that if you're riding a motorcycle, you've got to be going as fast as possible. It's a sort of beta male complex that you constantly feel as though you've got to prove yourself to every other road user that you're the fastest and most accomplished motorist on the road. I mean, I've known guys who, I've been with them in cars and they're perfectly normal and competent drivers, but then we go for a ride on our bikes and they ride like complete idiots. It's like a complete personality change, as though, when they swing the leg over a bike, they slip into another dimension where every road is a racetrack. Their ego just takes total control of them as soon as they sit on a bike. Now, I don't ride with people like that anymore. In fact, to be quite honest, I only ride solo now. I don't ride with other riders for this reason. In their heads, they think that they are giving off a display of ultimate motorcycle riding skill. But from my point of view, when I see people riding like this, what I see is someone who is riding at high speed into situations that they're only vaguely aware of. You never know what is around the next bend. It could be someone else like them that's taken the bend too wide and they're about to have a head-on confrontation with each other. It could be some sort of obstacle or hazard on the road. And you never know what is going to jump out of the bushes in front of you. You need to keep your speeds at a realistic level that allows you a reasonable reaction time and chance to take evasive manoeuvres. Yet what I see with a lot of these guys is every time, they run into a bend or they overtake people, it's a leap of faith that everything is going to be okay. The trusting in luck. I mean, the amount of times I see people overtaking vehicles at high speed, running directly into the path of an oncoming vehicle, and they honestly think it's down to that oncoming vehicle to move over so they don't hit them. This seems to be very common with motorcyclists, and it's not skill, it's just luck. They've been lucky so far, and you're only lucky until your luck runs out. It's not skill, it's stupidity. I often have young sort of viewers commenting that I ride like an old man. The thing is, I got to be an old man still riding after 45, 46 years because that's the way I ride. I can still make good progress on the road and take advantage of the slimness and agility of a motorcycle without taking unnecessary risks. Now, on the subject of riding with people that have this ego problem, don't do it if you don't feel comfortable with it. If you have mates whose idea of going for a group ride is to constantly treat it as a dick measuring competition to see who the best rider is, don't ride with them. As a tail gunner or somebody who's in the middle of a group, you are at far more risk from their riding than they are. They can pick and choose when they overtake or, when they take a risky manoeuvre. When you're in a group that's trying to stay together and you're trying to catch them up, it means you've got to take even bigger risks to catch up with them. And generally speaking, you're likely to be the one that's going to come a cropper because of it. So don't get involved with group rides like that. A motorcycle is just a mode of transport in a lot of ways like a car. The safest place on the road, the safest style of driving on the road with a motorcycle is to just move with the flow of traffic. Accidents caused by moving into the opposite lane, whether it's for a right turn or left turn, or if you're in the States or other countries, or overtaking, are disproportionately more likely to be fatal than any other accident on a motorcycle. So just go with the flow. There's no need to habitually overtake every vehicle that just happens to be going a little bit slower than you are. Go with the flow. Restraint and careful risk assessment is going to stand you in good stead if you want to continue riding until you've been riding 50 years or whatever. Good judgment and patience is one of the best skills that you can have as a motorcyclist. Now, commuting. A lot of these old timers back in the 60s, 70s, and in my case, right at the very beginning of the 1980s, we started off commuting to work. It was our only mode of transport for getting to and from work. Now, I've got to admit, I do have a bit of a giggle from time to time. More recently, I've had a few videos pop up, or thumbnails pop up in my feed about commuting. I commuted to work for a week and this is what I discovered, or the realities of commuting to work. On a motorcycle, you're just going to work, but you're going to work on a bike instead of a car. Piaget's schematas, you're doing exactly the same job, it just requires slightly different skills. You're not unicycling in reverse blindfolded over the Himalayas. It's a simple journey on a motorcycle, just like any other journey on a motorcycle. There are only two major differences. One is positive and one is negative. The positive difference is that it's much easier to get to work on a bike. You can filter in traffic, providing you do it sensibly. A bike, even a small bike, by and large, will get you to work quicker and more cheaply. During the rush hour where I live, I see 20 to 30 16-year-old lads on mopeds doing it. It's not a big deal. But there are disadvantages, just as there are in any type of motorcycle travel. One is, all motorcycles are fitted with cloaking devices. They don't tell you about it when you buy a bike. You can't find the switch to switch it off. So you're forced to ride a motorcycle as though you are invisible. Don't forget, a motorcycle is 25 to 33% narrower than a motor car. A door pillar on a motor car will very likely mask the presence of a motorcycle from certain angles at certain distances, leading to other road users not being able to see you. So be particularly cautious when you're filtering, if you have to filter. Approach all junctions with cautions at a speed where you can safely stop if someone pulls out in front of you. And when you're turning off at junctions in a way that means you've got to go into the opposite lane to cross it, plan and time your manoeuvre carefully. Don't take risks. Now, like a lot of these old timers that I spoke to, that have been riding for decades and decades and decades, we all started off commuting. It's a good basis for learning the craft of motorcycling, but it's not the be-all and end-all. I commuted for about 20 years, maybe just a little bit over 20 years. I don't need to anymore. One thing about commuting is you don't always have control over the weather. Now, you need to assess whether the weather conditions are suitable for motorcycling or not. If you've got a car, you've got the option of taking the car instead when the weather is particularly bad or unsuitable for biking. Obviously, access to warm, waterproof clothing is essential if you're commuting, but one thing that you've got to remember is that adverse weather conditions do affect the handling of a motorcycle more than they do perhaps a car. And that is the difference between just motorcycling for fun when the weather's suitable and having to motorcycle when the weather's not always suitable. When the roads are wet, tyres don't work as well. I get so many complaints from people that the tyres are faulty or the tyres are crap because when it rains, they get a bit slippy. I mean, of course they do. You've got water, which is a lubricant between your tyre and the tarmac. So you need to adjust your style of riding to suit the road conditions. You can't expect the bike to handle and behave exactly the same way it does on ice and wet roads as it will on warm, dry days. It's simple physics. I mean, I know in my youth I found myself travelling in snow and all sorts on a motorcycle. Not to be recommended, and you should, if possible, find alternatives when the weather turns particularly nasty. If you've got a car to fall back on, great. You might want to consider using public transport if it is available to you on those few days a year when you can't use your bike. Or you can speak to mates at work. You'll usually find there's someone that lives sort of in your neighbourhood that doesn't mind picking you up on his way to work and dropping you off on his way home. That's how I used to get round it. Bung him a few quid for petrol and everybody's usually quite happy. It's called using your experience and exercising good judgment. Now, the other common denominator that often comes into play with these survivors of multi-decade motorcycling is the choice of motorcycle. In most cases, they all made the same rookie mistake that I did when I first started riding. You know, my priority was to get onto bigger, faster bikes. But they all realised quite early on that a big, fast bike is just not really very practical on the roads. You can't use the power, the big, the heavy, the cumbersome. Really, they're just not practical. Most of them, like me, wised up and they downsized. Now, this helped financially because they weren't blowing the equivalent of a 1980s mortgage on a motorcycle. The sort of 350 to 500cc engine size is the sweet spot in motorcycling. It's got the performance that you need to run on the roads and keep up with traffic without paying a premium for excess power that you simply cannot use. Relatively cheap to run and cheap to insure, these bikes actually proved to be a more resilient motorcycling companion because they weren't affected too much by financial misfortunes in the family, in that they're not a huge financial burden that has to be reconsidered if the household fortunes change. Because they're so cheap to run, cheaper than a car, they become a financially future-proof commodity rather than an unnecessary sort of financial burden if their owners hit hard times. And a lot of people have attributed their ability to keep riding for 40, 50 or 60 years because they've stuck to smaller, cheaper machines. Now, the other advantage of smaller machines is that they stay manageable for a rider as they age. I think one of the biggest mistakes I see people making, and you know, I do look at the thumbnails of other people's videos. You've got older guys running a motorcycle channel. They've got a ruddy great big bike, and every other sort of thumbnail or video title seems to be, oh no, I've dropped my bike again. Again, this is not being able to let go of ego and buying an unnecessarily large bike, you know, still trying to prove that you're fit and you're with it. I remember a few years ago at a T-Spot doing some filming, about 5 years ago, there was a guy on a GS 1200 or 1250 BMW, you know, all the gear, rally suit and everything, and as it was pulling into the entrance there was a big pothole and a puddle, and obviously at low speed it didn't feel comfortable sort of riding through it. He probably didn't want to get his tyres wet, so he sort of braked without really planning what he was going to do next. The front wheel went into the pothole. He lost his balance and he ended up spread-eagled on the floor with his bike on top of it. Because under the circumstances, he just wasn't physically capable of taking the weight. And you know, I've watched videos in the past where people have complained, oh, you know, it was a gravel car park and the bike ended up going over while I was getting it out of the parking spot, or I was at a junction and, you know, waiting for traffic to pass and I don't know what happened, but the bike just went over. It's because the bike's too heavy for them. So as you get older, I've had to accept it. You know, I can't bench press 215 kilograms like I used to be able to. You have to downsize and to keep riding, you have to buy bikes that are manageable. There's no point making life difficult for yourself by buying bikes that are too big. And if I'm honest, looking back to the years when I did have big, impressive bikes, when you were parked up and you were talking to people, no one was ever impressed by the size of your bikes. The bikes that get the attention are the small modern classics. So the whole big, powerful, expensive, heavy bike scenario nowadays, I just, it's pointless. Theoretically, the wisdom that allows us to keep riding for half a century plus comes to all of us eventually. It comes to some people earlier than others. But the snippets of information that I've passed to you today in this video are common denominators to every single one of those old-timers' stories that I've heard over the last few years. They've all been through the same thought processes and they've all come to very similar conclusions. Now, we always get the arrogance of youth. I get it probably more than most putting these videos out, in that, I'll get young whippersnappers full of piss and vinegar telling me that I ride like an old man and I should get a proper bike. You might have been riding 10 years, you might have been riding 20 years, but the reality is you're still in the baby stages of riding motorcycles. You haven't gone the distance yet, but so far you've only experienced the basics of motorcycling, and there's plenty of time for the odds to catch up to you before you reach your half centenary. With age comes wisdom. An age without gaining wisdom is like a broken pencil. Pointless. If I was to die tomorrow, as I say, with 46 years of motorcycling has been the love of my life, I would die happy with no regrets. Motorcycling for me has been 100% enjoyment. There's been no dramas, zero injuries, unless you just count a few bruises. Just a long line of happy memories. And I put that down to the regime that I've described in this video. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so, helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I'd also appreciate it if you would leave a like, hype this video if the hype button is available to you, and consider subscribing to this channel if you're not already a subscriber. I am, of course, going to be back on Friday, so until then, please, ride safely, and I'll see you soon.